Hi, welcome to the Wide Open Road Arts Roving Conversation series. Today's conversation is with Louiseann King. Louiseann's practice explores the tension between permanence and the ephemeral. Materially, she works frequently in bronze, a weighty and traditionally masculine material that's juxtaposed with light and fragile ephemera collected and collated by the artist. We caught up with Louiseann at the Art Gallery of Ballarat, where her current work, Solus, was installed. Okay, so we're talking to Louiseann King today, who's a sculptor and installation artist based just outside Daylesford in Eganstown. So Louiseann, could you just begin by telling us a little bit about your practice, just how the history of it really, how you began?
Sure. Well, I went to art school when I just scraped in 18 because I wasn't quite sure what else to do, and that was a very attractive thing to do at the time, and loved it, and just completely loved being at art school. So I did an undergrad at Monash, and then I went straight to postgrad at VCA, loved it, and then started making my work independently. I had a studio at 200 Gertrude Street, and then the year after that I started lecturing at Monash and then at RMIT, and was working part-time and working on my practice, and I haven't really looked back. Really? Wow. Yeah, it was quite a direct pathway for me. Yeah.
And you did a PhD at Monash, is that right?
I did. I started the PhD when I was 29 and finished a few years later. Yeah. And that was really a fantastic time because for lots of reasons, doing the PhD, I had amazing supervisors in Dr. Bronwyn Stocks, and she was your supervisor too. Yeah, she's amazing.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, and I had Associate Professor Louiseann King. Yeah, who's just an amazing man, and he actually was my lecturer during undergrad, and I believe I'm the only person that he's ever seen through from undergrad to PhD. And so we've got a very close relationship as a consequence of that. He's a wonderful man. So I had these two fantastic supervisors. I was also very fortunate that I was on the Monash Silver Jubilee Scholarship, which was great. I was working part-time at RMIT, and it was a really prolific time in my life. I travelled quite a lot at that time, and was busy working, travelling, and it was a really good concurrence of many positive things. So amongst them having adequate funding to actually do what I needed to do, which is as you are very well aware, a rare thing to have. So that was great. Yeah.
So what were the things that were driving your practice back then, and how has that changed or developed?
Well, I've always kind of slipped between stools in terms of media, that's for certain, and I, as an undergrad, was in the printmaking department for my major. That's where I met Ewan, but was really doing mainly photography, and they just kind of turned a blind eye to that, and we'll just do whatever you want to do. And then when I did my postgrad, the same thing. It was we don't really have photography here, but just do what you're going to do. And so I suppose my first love was photography in terms of medium, and I think that's actually still really present within the work, especially within Solus. The photographic element is really strong here in terms of points of view and seeing, and the notion of the lens and how that works. So those ideas were definitely present, and when I left art school, I started doing textile work because I always really enjoyed textiles, and I mean you could hardly turn up into art school with textile work at that time. I think Kathy Temin was there at the moment, and she was in painting, and struggling with doing sewn textile work in that environment. So I showed at 200 Gertrude Street and also Linden textile work. Some of that work was later exhibited in the Moet Chandon touring show, so it was really taken on quite quickly. And so textiles have kind of always been a major part of my practice. And glass, because both of those things, and the domestics, so those kinds of things were always of interest to me, and kind of ideas of the gendering of objects and how that works, and kind of unpicking that a little. When I went to start my MA, which I then transferred up to PhD, again I was slipping between stools, and I was unsure as to where I should have my space at the art school. Marion Hosking, who was there at the time, said, "Why don't you have a desk in jewellery?" And great, I'll have a desk in jewellery, which is what I did, and it was wonderful, because that really started a new area of research for me in my practice, and that informed like pretty much everything that I've been doing since. And Marion and I are still very close. So that kind of the way metal jewellery casting works, where something is lost, so lost wax casting method, something is lost for something else to come into existence, is a very interesting process. I think it's just magic, and nothing has to exist for a period of time, and there's sacrifice involved, because your original always has to be lost. It's a beautiful notion, because you must be prepared to sacrifice the original in order to create something else. And so I was very interested in using I suppose I've always kind of pushed, what can I use here? And so whilst the jewellers were using wax, I was like, what else can I use? What is this process? So once I understood the mechanics of it, I started playing around with other materials to burn out. I was really interested in transferring textiles into metal, and you can see that that's what I've got going on in the Fairy Gallery with the crochet pieces, and that's something that I've been working on for quite a long time, is that kind of work, because at the same time, this was again during that period where when I was at Monash doing my Masters at that point and then PhD, I won a prize, a sculpture prize, which was the Fundair Sculpture Prize, and this was fantastic, because I desperately wanted to get into a foundry at that point, and I met the owner of the foundry, Cameron McIndoe, and said, "This is great, this is what I want to cast, how about I give you your money back for the prize and you cast this for me?" And Cam said, "It's nowhere near enough money." And he said, "Oh, but if you want," he said, "why don't you come work with us and we'll teach you, and then it will be enough money." And which was this awesome opportunity to go and learn a technique that I hadn't I understood theoretically, but I needed to learn how to do it. And so I worked in the foundry with the guys at that point, and I still do. So like after now decades, I've still been in there with them, going in and doing I had to do all the prep work for my work, and the chasing at the other end, and the patina. So the guys really do the pour, and this leads to a much more intimate knowledge of the materials and processes and why you're doing particular things. And I think too, as a woman artist, working in that environment, and I suppose I've been there for so long, and the guys are kind of very brotherly, that I hadn't really thought about it very much. And one day I said to Cam, "Are there any other women?" And he said, "Sure." And I went, who? And he said, two. And so I said, what percentage, Cam, would be working here in bronze casting? He said, 2%.
Wow.
So we're completely in the minority, and that's why I suppose Cameron has been quite ferociously championing women's work. Yeah, he has. And the guys there have been always really interested and encouraging with my work. I think that they see it as very different to the way they work, because their work comes from a very particular lineage, and it's always monumental. It's huge. It's sturdy and robust. It's part of a certain trajectory in terms of bronze casting, and my work is not that at all. My work's always on the edge of failing, and it does fail regularly, and that's the interest. But I find that an interesting place to be at.
Well, that's how new things, because you're always pushing. You're not saying
exactly.
it's safe.
Yeah, exactly. It's not safe, and so like the casting the dead birds. That's been a really fascinating process to do that over the years. I think, Suze, you're on a question there.
Well, I want you to tell us about, when you talk about the prep work before
Yeah.
you do the casting, what is that?
That can be quite involved, yeah. Yeah, that's right. So because I don't use a wax to start with, I've got to make it into a wax-like object in some ways, and also that I need to sprue the work. And spruing is the system whereby the metal will be poured into the wax mould, into the hollow, and how you do that differs every time for what you're making, so there's lots of variables in this. And I'm also really interested, and you'll notice that with the work in the Ferry Gallery, that I've retained the sprue systems, because I think they're really important in the work, and I really love their abstract modernism and these kind of quite pure lines that are going on with that. And this is all part of that process too, that if you drop off your work at the foundry and just come back and get it, you miss all that. You miss it all. You miss it all. You don't see all the places where you can make decisions about, can I do it there or there? How will this work? And you then, through your failures, you begin to understand what the process can and can't do. But then there's always the unexpected, and that just keeps it really interesting, in my opinion.
And there's an intimacy that you're getting with your work, what you're describing.
Absolutely.
It's not the outsourced production.
Not at all.
No, but you can feel in the work, like the experience of looking at, these works versus the big monuments that you're describing is, very different and much more intimate.
Much more intimate, and perhaps more vulnerable. Perhaps, I think that, and though it is the medium of the monument, bronze is it's heroic. It's I really love that I can change this medium into something that the medium has this capacity, I suppose. I'm not changing it, it just has this capacity to be something else, and that it actually, I take something that can be so ephemeral, so vulnerable, and then it can be, it can still evoke the language of the monument, but in another way.
Would you call it a feminist work? Is it about, do you think that's one of the driving motivations in what you're exploring? Is it about strength and fragility coming together, or not that feminine has to be fragile, but at least disturbing masculine sort of narratives of monuments and spectacle art, public art?
I couldn't agree more. And firstly, I think that making art is a deeply feminist act. I think that just even, and it's an act of defiance in a time when superficially it looks like women are encouraged in the arts, but if you actually really look at the figures and at the reality for women artists, it's not the case at all. So I think it is a defiant act to do it in the first place, and then I think that as as a woman artist, I suppose I can't not take that on, you know, like it is always with me. And I suppose here we are in the Crouch Gallery, surrounded by the work of men.
Yes.
And these are the images that, and other images like these, that have defined the Australian landscape, that have described the Australian landscape, that have oftentimes actually described our Australian identity. You know, these are those works. I suppose the Hans Heissen over here is one of those works, the Streeting, and the Wonga art paintings in particular, just to name a few in this room. But I hope that in installing them this way, that something else also starts to happen. That it's not, these galleries are normally curated in quite a historical fashion, so you will just see images grouped in a chronological way. Of course, there are some thematic things that go on as well, but it's mainly chronological. But this isn't chronological, this is subjective, this is personal, this is taking on a kind of that wonderful Italian word, that simpatico, that empathy with the artist, with the view, with that idea of I am also looking. I suppose that's what I'm really doing here as a curator and as the artist, is I'm saying I am also looking, I am seeing, I am stepping into your viewpoint at this point. And the way that these works are arranged here in the Crouch is that I've actually arranged them so that they move chronologically through the day, and so they start at dawn over this side, and we move right through till we're about at midday here, and then we're moving through to kind of afternoon, and then into the evening, sunset, and then into dusk.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So it's really soft and it's really slow, and I know that some people are kind of getting that straight away, and other people it kind of literally dawns on them. And then other people have said to me that there's a wholeness in this room, and they're not quite sure why that's happening. They have said this room is really complete. It's very peaceful. It's very whole, and I think that might be about the quality of the day is actually, of a day is present here, but it's kind of a fractured day too, which is really interesting. There's so many people viewing that day, and we're participating in that, and the vitrine acts as a viewing lens for that. And as you can see through the vitrine at the moment, we can see the Arthur Streeting painting, which the vitrine frames. And that painting is Vanishing Forest, and of course I'm overlaying that work with my own work, with the shadow play that's occurring right now. I can't see that very much because we've got bright daylight, but it is that sense that I am also contributing to that dialogue. There are other dialogues, and this kind of empty space within the vitrine is it's a charged space. It's not. It's both a lens and it's a void and coexisting, because the ability to hold everything. It's not holding nothing. It's holding everything, and that's quite a lovely thing. Yeah.
There's a lot going on, isn't there, with these work?
I hope so.
There really is with the day.
Yeah.
And with the what era? What are some of the earliest?
I think probably around the earliest is the 1880s, late 1880s, and then we go to about 1930s.
So very Victorian.
Yes, yeah. So we're looking at Heidelberg area Victorian works that are in this space, and that's what this space normally holds.
Yes.
Though it's been quite interesting actually curating it, that some of the works that I removed from this space I've actually replaced with works by the same artist but incredibly different works. So one of those would be the David Davies work, which is over here, and previously there was a very heroic picture of two men resting, big trees, and big heroic picture, a very important picture. But I've actually chosen to give that a rest for a little while and bring up this small painting which is a moonlight image of a woman in the landscape. And so he's still represented in this space, but quite differently. Quite differently. So, it shifts it. I mean, a lot of these works hadn't been shown for over a decade too. So it's been an enormous process to look differently at works, look how they may work together.
And it's dialogue and disruption, isn't it? You're sort of engaging and disturbing a little bit.
Yeah. It's a quiet disruption.
Quiet disruption.
Quiet, that it's not like, it's not ugly. It's actually quite, I was going to use the word maternal, and I think I might. And actually, I think it's actually a word, though, that the author of the catalogue essay for my show, and that, he actually used it, and he said it was thrumming with the maternal.
So how did you feel about that?
Oh, excited.
Yeah.
And I thought, what is it about the maternal? And I thought, it's about a nurturing, and I think it's about a gathering. And I was thinking, what do women do? You know, the traditional thing is the men are the hunters and the women are the gatherers, and I am such a gatherer. There's no question that I gather, and I'm gathering. And I'm gathering and I'm bringing together and I'm allowing things to speak. And it's that thing of kind of embracing what there is rather than deflecting, but rather kind of seeing links and being being quite the peacemaker in
uniting force.
Quite a uniting force. I wonder whether that is the maternal. I just put it out there.
It's definitely part of it.
Part of it is, isn't it?
Yeah. And protective too, like you're preserving you in a way.
Absolutely.
There's a life-preserving element of it too. And obviously an environmental concern, which
is massive.
Could we just add that, or could you just, because something that at this stage the viewers wouldn't be getting is the sound, which we will play at the start for anyone watching this, but how does that fit in?
The sound is a collaboration with a colleague of mine from RMIT and a friend, that's Philip Sonatas, and so Philip and I recorded the sound on my property, which is in Eganstown. So I'm on 20 acres of bushland there, and it's I really wanted the feeling of the landscape to be present, and so we did that for my previous show, which was at the Bendigo Art Gallery last year, and that was Arbor Temporis Momentum. And this year for this show, we used some of those recordings, and Philip introduced other recordings from Victorian forests that he's made to create what I was hoping for. And I think that we've kind of got a kind of sense of a range of physical experiences in the landscape, and what I wanted to get across was this feeling, and this happened when we were working on the previous show, and Philip had sent me a recording to listen to, and I'd had to get up and do something else, and I came back into the room, but I'd forgotten I had it running, and I thought I had the window open, and I was looking around with the windows are open, but they're closed, and then I thought that's exactly what I want, is the feeling that the windows are open, that there's a portal to somewhere else, and that's what happens here with this work, and that it's quietly disruptive to have these landscape sounds being emitted from this empty cabinet. And children, as we were saying earlier, have found this completely mysterious and beguiling, and they've been hugging the vitrine and placing their faces to the vitrine and lying under it, and all kinds of things have been going on with children's interactions with the wondrous, which is really lovely.
Such a juxtaposition in the Bendigo Art Gallery. Ballarat Art Gallery. Well, in Bendigo Art Gallery too, both such, fine institutions, but there's a divorce from nature.
Exactly. It's the unexpected, and that's what we were talking about, that disruption. It's a disruption. it doesn't have to be ugly, it doesn't have to be horrible, it's just disruptive in a quiet way, and you kind of then are able to be somewhere else and be kind of present perhaps within the landscape images and within the work, within the bronze casts that are above you as well. It just shifts things, and I'm interested in that little bit of it's that Roland Barthes sings the punctum. It's a little.
I did my master's.
Go for it. Because it really is a punctum. It's a small thing. It's not. We're not looking at the big thing, but it's a thing that punctures. And I think that that's how this works as well, and that the sound brings people into the vitrine. They start walking the vitrine, and that's when you start seeing the paintings through the vitrine, and you see them in lots of different ways, because you see them overlap and underlap each other. You see them blurred in the Victorian glass. You see them brought together in a completely new way, and you're making that happen through your movement. So it's kind of in some ways a performance piece for the viewer. They don't know they're doing that. It's absolutely participatory.
Phenomenological, of course.
Exactly. That motion. I'm walking, and we have chairs in here today, but normally this space has no chairs, and so you keep moving through the space. You circumnavigate it, and I wanted this horizon line, a really strong sense of the horizon, that we are looking at something together.
And the warmth too seems to be an aspect of your work. I don't know how deliberate that is, but certainly bringing nature and even the bronze interior, there's such a warming component. Is that something that's conscious for you, or and that may also tie into that maternal commentary?
The warmth part. I think there's always natural components to my work, but they're always they've always been processed somehow, and so the works that you can see up here, the bronze works, so they, at first glance, I think people think they are sticks, that I've gathered up sticks and placed them up there, and but then when you start looking at them a bit more carefully, I've left little clues that it's not as it is, because I've left the sprues and polished up the sprues, so there's bright little areas throughout it, and then the way they've been arranged in the science-like stands with the clamps and the bases, something that I've extracted. I used as a template for that bobbin stand from a vintage sewing machine. So it's very much about construction and about the way, about one thing replacing the other, and to have something. There's always a price. So you have to you lose something to have something else. So here, nature is replaced, sacrificed for culture, and that's always happened. It's not, that's the beast, and that's what's also going on in the Ferry Gallery with that work, because of course the forest that we see here, this landscape, there's a pseudo-forest going on in there. The trees are pedestals. We've got they've entered into a domestic space, the interior, and rather than the exterior. So it forms it's a bit more of a psychological space,
and very abstract too. It's been taken out and above and preserved and framed, and this sort of nature anyway, like it's all it's contained, isn't it?
And that's
although yours is less contained.
Yours is much less contained.
It's a bit wilder. It's probably more like my garden, quite wild. But it's I suppose it's the idea of making something from something else, that we start with something and then we start modifying it for it to become something else. And I suppose that women do this in the construction of the domestic space, and I'm not saying men don't do it as well, but it's just in a different way. That space in here in the Crouch Gallery, we're in the landscape looking out, whilst in the Ferry Gallery we are inside looking out to the landscape, and that's quite a different viewpoint. And so I've gathered up in the Ferry Gallery a number of portraits of women, and women and children. And these would normally be dispersed through the gallery in other ways. When you start putting them together, I wanted a real feeling of that we were here. We weren't absent from this story. Women have always been present in the story, but by grouping them together, and I'm really conscious that at those times, you know, the suffragette movement was really strong, and that there was protest that was going on, and also the now I've just gone blank, but the movement, the teetotaler movement, what was that called? It was a movement to, it was apparent, clearly what was happening is that Australia was becoming kind of a drunkard colony, and women were really strong on this, basically to get pubs to close at certain times, and so that's why pubs started having to close at 6 o'clock, you know, because men were just going and drinking all their wages, and it was causing chaos and to the whole society. And so the temperance movement, there you go, I remember now. Yeah, and these were all happening at the same time, and it's actually quite fascinating to know that there was a power that was going on that was constructing what was happening, but it's often largely dismissed and
and like you say, interspersed, and this is emphasising it by bringing it together.
Exactly. So the images on the far wall, we've got the images of women indoors, and we've also got the still life images, including a Gould painting of dead birds, and the girls in this portrait, they just look fabulous, and they're holding a little parrot on their wrist, and it's not lost on me that I use so many dead birds in my work. So those, you know, obviously a lot of thought gone into placing these together. And then on this wall we have images of women in the landscape, and they're really subjective and beautiful because we've got women who are very relaxed in that space. You know, they're really at one with the nature that surrounds them. And then on this wall over here in the Ferry Gallery, we have images of that landscape being modified, and so the quite heroic images of men cutting down trees and changing that landscape, building Ballarat and building the area, and making it something else, a place that can be inhabited by white people, obviously, which of course it's not lost on me that we are on Aboriginal land, and that there is a self-consciousness that I have about it, and anxiety about that as well, which other people I feel deal with much more eloquently than I do, but I hope that that I can approach the work in a as respectful manner as I can. That it's, I feel it's such a big thing for Australia that I hope one day we will actually find a place where we can all sit comfortably.
Which we're not there yet.
We're nowhere near.
And I think as an artist, it's a really challenging thing. It's really hard to want to talk about your space and place as an artist here, and you know, with the weight of history, it's really hard to know how to do that.
Absolutely, and I think one is always self-conscious in that, and maybe that's a situation that we accept, and that is our burden too, is also that self-consciousness is part of the respectfulness that we can offer, and it's fantastic having Marlene Gibson's work up at the same time as my own. Really interesting to have that dialogue occurring, and I hope, you know, there'll be future dialogues in these spaces that involve Aboriginal artists as well, and it's just starting. It's starting, you know, it's a starting point.
And it's amazing it's only just starting to, but at least it is.
Well, previously the no contemporary artists have exhibited upstairs here in the historical galleries before. No. So this is the
does
first.
feel like a very different show.
It's
a very unique idea.
It's been amazing to actually do this. So the process started when Gordon Morrison was here as a director, and previously Gordon had visited my studio, and this was when my children were very little, and said to me that when I'm ready there would be a solo show for me at the Art Gallery of Ballarat. And it was great. He was very supportive, and then when my littlest went to primary school, I was able to contact Gordon and say, I think I'm going to be ready now. I'll be okay to do this. And so he asked me to have a walk around the gallery to select my space. He should have been more specific, I think, because I think he thought I was going to select a space downstairs in the temporary exhibition spaces. And then I said to the curator, which is Julie McLaren, I think I might like to show up here. And she said, sure, great, let's do this. And then a few weeks after that, I said to Julie, I think I might like to change some of the paintings. And she said, sure, we can do that, that's fine. And then a few weeks after that, I said, I think I need to change all of the paintings. and Julie was like, we'll make that happen. She was absolutely
receptive.
Incredible through the whole process, and helping, like as she'd be going down to the basement on occasions to look for something else, and she'd then photograph things that she'd think were of interest to me with this body of work, and she'd been true. So we would just start tuning it together, and then we would spend days in the basement together, selecting works, making lists. Fantastic process, And I think because my children go to school here in Ballarat, so I would be here twice a day, every day. So it was very easy and natural process for me to spend time here. I'd come into the gallery here and just, I would think at least once a day to spend time in the space, and it just became clearer what I was doing through that process.
So, is that what your life is like now? Is your practice your primary? Is it your only occupation besides obviously
looking after my children? Yes. Because I can't work a job. It would be impossible for me to work a proper.
Because of your practice and where you live?
Mainly my children and their needs.
Yes.
Yeah, their needs are high, and so I need to be available for my children. So I need to always be flexible and open to whatever is required. And I think the regional thing is also really big. And a friend of mine sent me advertisement recently for a curatorial position in Melbourne, and I was thinking,
West Space by any chance?
No, it was a curatorial position, but it was full time and in Melbourne. I was thinking, well, I can't possibly do that kind of work, so maybe I could take on project work or part-time work, but I think I need to, and my own practice is, it's difficult enough to try to maintain a practice of any kind, really, when you've got children factored into it.
Have you always lived in a regional area, or were you in Melbourne? You were in Melbourne.
So I was in Melbourne in my 20s and to my mid-30s, and then we had our first child. We're living in Footscray, this fantastic 3-story warehouse conversion. It was all open plan, and then we had this little boy who was, you can see this, it had balconies. Can you believe this? So it was just like we couldn't get out of there fast enough. It was just, he would kill himself. It would just be, there was no way we could keep him safe in that environment. No, so we moved, and my husband's workshop, he's a furniture designer and maker. So Christian and I work very closely together. So his workshop was in kind of Mentone area, and so it was just not working out. He was hardly seeing our child, and it was just not working out. So we needed to do a tree change, come to regional Victoria, where we thought we'd be able to maintain our practices in some way, and so that Christian could continue his workshop practice as a furniture designer and maker. And I had a studio at home, which I find is the only way for me to keep working on any level. And even so, I found in the making of this show that though I have a separate studio, I had to bring the work into the domestic space, into the kitchen, so that I could keep working and keep an eye on the children at the same time. So I couldn't. You can't, as you both know, being mums yourselves, you cannot really leave the room, because once you've left the room, anything could happen, and it does. You could be anywhere. That's right. You could be kilometres away, even if you're adjacent. You are in the adjacent space, but chaos is occurring. So you have to be in the room.
It's that presence, and also being tied to it, because this is the classic analysis of female life socially, is that you can't move as much. Like your mobility is restricted because you are tied to place with children, and this is
we are all experiencing that.
Figuring out someone's got to be around and got to be available, and like you say, flexible and responsive.
Responsive, because you've always got somebody who needs you. Like somebody's hungry, someone has just hurt someone else, someone has got a blood nose, someone has lost their toothbrush, and or whatever, or can't find. There's always exactly, and these things require our immediate attention. You cannot really. You can't stop this.
Has that changed, like, that having to be in the space and everything, has that changed the type of work that you make, do you think?
Or what you're doing?
It did to a degree. The scale of it, I suppose, the large scale elements, I work with Christian on, so kind of I couldn't actually make my work without the support from my husband. It's like he is an ultra feminist, and if he is just incredible, because
very fortunate.
Very fortunate. I'm deeply aware of that. I am, because not only does he support my practice entirely, he helps with making it. Also, when I'm giving him impossible requests, like it's always exactly as one does. I want the sound element in here, but there are no chords, and nobody can see anything, and I've just got, he's got to make some magic occur. So the larger elements, Christian will work on, or I and Christian will work on. Then I will have time when I'm doing casting, where I'm in the foundry, and that's like their full days, and then Christian will do pickups and things like that. So I would go and work with either the foundry or a friend of mine who's a silversmith. He's been helping me a great deal. So it's just sometimes my skill level's at a certain level, and he's been able to help me to do things, and then so I suppose I outsource some of the larger scale work so that I can keep working. But it is it isn't a simple process. It requires enormous logistics to make it work.
And do you feel that for your practice and your lifestyle, that having a partner who, it sounds like he's working and earning a regular income, is that necessary for you to be able to do the things that you do, or have you reached a point in your career where that's not as much of an issue? Like, could you support your own practice?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And the problem is actually that for Christian, when he's supporting my practice, means that he's not working on his business, and because he's a sole business person, we don't get holiday leave or long service leave or sick leave and things like that. So it becomes doubly disastrous for our family. And I suppose, everyone deals with this differently. I suppose we've just had to go into debt in order to make this happen.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
It's terrible.
For your practice, that's what it requires.
It does. It does.
And it's crazy that someone, you've done so well, and you're at a particular point in your career where you should absolutely be supporting yourself or your career, be possible.
But it simply isn't. And actually, I wrote to a friend of mine last night regarding this, because we were talking about the arts industry supports millions of people, in other ways. But the problem is that we're not actually employed, and we need my argument, and I talk to Esther Anatolitis at NAVA regularly about this, that we really need a minimum wage, and so we need to be on a minimum wage and then use our projects and our grants to support projects. But this is something that isn't happening, and I worked out that if for an artist to receive the annual minimum wage, an artist would need to have 12 solo shows in public art galleries like this per year. So
that's minimum wage.
That's minimum wage. So we haven't taken any materials or business expenses out. So that's just to earn
that's to
earn that 36,000, which is the annual minimum wage.
So full on.
Yeah. So that's the truth of it. Yeah. 12 solo shows per year. And the thing is, of course, no one is having 12 solo shows in public art galleries per year, because there aren't that many public art galleries to go around. So, and you would never have
that productive.
One a year is amazing.
Well, yeah, that's right. Probably, and in a public art gallery, it's got to be kind of even out to represent all of us in some way. Not
that one lifetime is actually really good. If you
Exactly.
have a show something like this, that's great.
This is a very. I am deeply aware that this is a very privileged position I am in, to have a solo show like this. At this stage in my career, to do this. But it's certainly not something I could repeat 12 times per year to achieve. And also, like the materials, when you are trying to make work of a certain calibre and scale, it costs money.
It costs a lot of money.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money.
Does that create an anxiety surrounding your practice when you're taking risks and you're investing in a major show or major work?
Yeah.
Would you say when you're about to, because I watched a video about you making your Bendigo art gallery work, and I was struck by just the intensity of what you were doing and the delicacy, but also just the resources required to do this work, and the peacefulness with which it appeared that you were doing it. And for me, I immediately perceive anxiety, which is my own anxiety about investing into a major work, and I'm just wondering, does that exist for you, and how do you manage it, and how do you persist?
I think I manage it very badly, because I do have lots of issues with it. But the other thing is that I suppose I receive enough interest and support where, like including your support today, where I feel I am making something important, that it is valuable, that it is that I have to, and I suppose it's a bit it is in kind of the, as my dad would say, in the symphony that's life, all of us have a note to sing, and we have to sing. You have to sing your note, and it may not sound like it's a really important note, but if it's missing, it's all ruined, it's just kind of not quite right. And so that's my note to sing, and I have to sing this note, and so sometimes it's, not sometimes regular. The situation is such that it causes deep concern for me, because it's not the concern for the work at all. It's really the financial and time situation, whereby normally in every other industry, I suppose an artist at my stage, or a person at my stage career-wise, would be enjoying great accolades and also financial success too. Security. They would achieve security by this stage, to know that when they're using their card, that it's not going to bounce, and that they don't have to, be constantly worrying about finances. But the thing is that if you haven't made the work, then you've got nothing to sell either. So you have to take the risk. You have to make this leap of faith, and then hope that others take the leap with you. So I suppose there might be a time, I noticed that the Art Gallery Ballarat actually commissioned a work from me last year, and that was fantastic to work on a small, it was not a large commission, but a small commission for them. And I think that's a really forward-thinking way of doing things, because there's that reassurance of payment. The artist knows the parameters of this thing, you know, that this is what they have to spend, this is what they're expected to produce something along the lines of, you know, this and this. And that's a great way of doing things, but really...
You don't have that very often.
No. I think that was the first and only time that's ever happened for me.
It's like a job, isn't it? Like
yes,
the security of having a job, which...
And we need that. I think that it's really, it's amazing. And I told a friend of mine who works a regular job what the artist fee is for an artist to do this. She was horrified. She was like, surely you've got it wrong. And she was just, she just couldn't really believe it, that was the case, because it's really kind of, we're looking at 2%, 5% of what it's really worth. And but the problem also has been that artists continue to do this, and so there was the Say No to Nothing campaign, which you're no doubt aware of, and that is really important. But the problem is now that we've kind of said no to nothing, but it's not much more than nothing is what we're getting.
And there is still a lot of nothing as
There's
well.
still
it's just
too
the
much
nothing that you don't put in your budget, or you know.
And you kind of you're quickly ostracised and penalised too, and perceived as demanding and true-like. If you are requesting your artist fee, or your or saying, look, it's really not enough. It's not enough. And interestingly, in the performing arts, who have got things much more sorted than we have, much more sorted, because they pay per kind of session, and they're much more unionised. And there's much more about the collective. But artists, we don't kind of tend to talk about money, and we don't share that information with each other. It's just kind of, that's the culture, but it's really shot us in the foot.
It's an interesting ideas then for ways for moving forward, maybe for artists as more of a collective.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's what Esther is doing at Nava. She's really setting it up as a union. You know, it's about protecting, artists' rights and pushing forward towards a better way. And the Greens actually have put up at different times a model where artists would receive the minimum income. So they would receive the equivalent of unemployment benefits. So it's not minimum income, it's just kind of subsistence, existence. But if you can demonstrate that you are contributing to society through works on public art, or you're showing your work, or you're contributing somehow, and you're an artist, that you would then receive this stipend. That's the way forward, because then everyone is protected. There's a small safety net under everyone, that there's something coming in, not nothing.
And if you're demonstrating it, you're doing the work, you know, like you're working hard and you're competitive within the...
exactly. And it would go up to, you know, a panel at some point. You know, you'd have to apply for this and say, can I be regarded as an artist? You'd have to tick some criteria of, you know, that you show regularly, or that you run public art workshops, or you're contributing somehow to the culture.
That's a great idea.
We
need to talk about it more, don't we?
It would save a lot of people, and it would actually, if you really look at it, because women in the arts, I don't know, I'm probably on a soapbox here,
but it's what we want.
Women in the arts are doubly penalised, because we do not have, if we've been able to work prior to having children, often that's been part-time, erratic, so we've hardly got any no super. And then we take time to care for our children, because normally we wouldn't be able to pay someone else to care for them. And when I did the maths, looking to try to get my children into some childcare at some point, it was like we couldn't afford childcare. It'd just be much more than I could possibly earn.
Because as an artist, it's not like you just
you can't
making heaps of money while they're at childcare.
No, exactly.
$40 an hour for childcare, or $40 a day, I think, is what you can cheaply get it around Tasmania.
Yeah.
It's like what you'd have to,
to earn that.
To make sure that that's
that was covered, and so I wouldn't be able to earn that. And so then you kind of look at that and go, okay, so there's periods where you had such low income that there's no super, there's no savings, there's no income, and then women, you're kind of entering the 40s and 50s we're so far behind men.
It's quite terrifying, really, isn't it? When you stop and think about it, and yet it doesn't stop the determined ones from doing it.
No, it's quite compulsive.
It is.
Well, I liked your analogy about the note to sing. That brings you.
And if you know yourself, if you know what's going on, then you can't do anything else.
No.
It's a really, and I think, I don't know about you, but I feel like Australia is a different context for that as well. Like, perhaps beyond the metropolitan centres, there's so much less support for art as a practice or as a field to go into. So then there's sort of even more difficulty.
Yeah, it certainly there is less support. There's less opportunities. There's less of everything that's going on, and there's also something I've noted is there's very little to take work from regional Victoria into the centres. So either into Melbourne or Sydney or anywhere else, there's actually no vehicle to.
That's something that's actually one of our motivators. That's something we hope to do with Vodafone. We have done a bit, and we hope to continue to do.
Yes, to show local artists and then stage it in the city, or even if we've done sort of art bombing in a way, we've gone in and we've just sort of put it in public places to try and get it out there.
Yeah, and that needs to happen because because like we've got nets, as you're aware of, but nets require a certain framework in order to make that happen. And so, for example, the Art Gallery of Ballarat, with their one registrar and one curator, they cannot. They do not have the staffing to set this up as a nets touring show, and so. It doesn't happen, and it's not because they don't want to or they don't believe in it. They just can't, and it's not really possible. So then the touring element for a major show, and I mean this would look great in a number of contexts.
It would be amazing.
NGV
next stop.
I would love to have the opportunity to do something similar to NGV.
What you could curate there in terms of the work you could step up.
That would be amazing. Yeah, incredible. Just need to get one of the curators to come and visit this, which would be.
It might happen.
I live in hope. To see who one does ask. One does ask, but then one does not always get a reply. One only rarely gets a reply. And that's the other thing too, is that at a certain point in your career, I don't think I'm not being kind of. See, women, we find it hard to be forward, don't we? And I would think that at this stage in my career, if I've written to someone, a curator, that they would do me the courtesy of writing back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a response, but that is a rare thing to even receive a response. So it is, even from other women, and you think that there's kind of you've earned it after a certain amount of practice. It's not like you're straight out of undergrad or you've just when you've done decades of practice, that there's a bit more support, because where is it? I kind of look at it, and it's been quite interesting that a lot of the support that I've received, the actual physical hands-on support, has actually been from men, and God love them, because they've done it, like they're real, like my husband, Cameron McIntyre, the gold and silversmith, Steve Walsh, who helps me, putting together my work, there's been actually some really incredible men, but then having said that, like, it's been incredible working with Julie McLaren on this show, and she has been an absolute force. And there was this funny comment at the start of the year when Louise Teggett came in, and she was incredibly supportive of this show, and we were doing a talk to the volunteer guides explaining what was going to happen, and one elderly gentleman kind of grumped off and went, we've got a female director, a female curator, and a female artist. And we kind of laughed and thought, better get used to it. That was, like, because things can change, but I think actually to support women artists at this point, it needs to be not just women and not just men. Everyone needs to kind of come in and say, do we want to see women's work? Like that really is what we're asking. Yes. And interestingly, some of the collections, well, the only collection I know of that collects women's artwork, the acquisition policy is only for women who have died, and it's a non-living artists. And
that is terrible, isn't it?
So yes, my husband and I looked at each other and go, is it worth it? I'm not sure.
At what point in your career?
Yeah, is it worth it? Should I just, take a little step out in front of the bus?
Maybe you could fake it.
Yes, maybe you could fake it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, she had to
project,
fake it. Yeah, so you can put a nice little eulogy somewhere, and
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, I know, but it's just it becomes.
It's a big and complex issue, isn't it?
It's huge, and we can laugh about it to some degree, but we're kind of we're half crying, aren't we? I think that the women artists who have preceded us in the 70s, those angry, fantastic, militant feminists, would be appalled to see this situation.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yes, because we are their daughters.
Yes.
And we are probably worse off than they were because we're educated.
Yes.
But we are unable to achieve those things that they thought were possible.
And had the optimism. We had the optimism that things were going to be different.
That's indeed true. It's quite confronting.
Yes.
Yeah.
That has been so wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
That's given a dark note to leave on.
It is very dark, but it's in line with a lot of, pretty much we've had a universal sort of response from people that we've spoken to in terms of the difficulty of making art now.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for visiting.